Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network. Chris Meaney hanging out with you and bringing in producer Tino. Make sure you give my guy a follow. He is a big part of this show, and I'm very thankful for him every single day, getting everything set up for me perfectly and running this show. Tino Rodriguez _. Tino, what's up, my man?
I'm glad to finally show my face to the people. I think it's been long enough, Meaney. I've had that image up whenever I appear on the show. I think it's time. You can't see me right now, but the people at home can see me. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be on Game Plus Network. Finally, nice little appearance here. And honestly, I appreciate you bringing me on to talk to Giants, but I don't know if I'm gonna hate you or love you after this. So we'll see how it goes. But luckily, we don't do that until the end of the show. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on, man.
Of course, brother. Yeah, we are going to preview the Giants. I mean, you're a level-headed Giants fan. I mean, some people can be super biased, but you and I were just chatting after the show yesterday, and you had some thoughts. I'm like, you know what? You're coming on tomorrow, and we're going to talk about Giants and the football team that is Washington. And tomorrow we'll bring in Gilles Gallant, as we will every Thursday, to touch on the Thursday night football game from a prop standpoint, just see what he is feeling, because yeah, he certainly is the GOAT when it comes to calling touchdowns. Man, I don't know how he does it. But on Monday night, I think he had 3 or 4 that he called correctly, which is super impressive. So we're going to talk about a couple added and drop players. Now, the added players are pretty obvious, the players that we talked about yesterday and Monday in the waiver wire rankings. Up at the top, it is Elijah Mitchell. And this is from Yahoo. I think majority of people play Yahoo as opposed to ESPN and CBS. Maybe I'm wrong there. I don't know. I think it was just easy for me to see the most added on Yahoo as opposed to other sites. Like over at ESPN, the most added was Le'Veon Bell. What? Who the heck is picking up Le'Veon Bell? Anyways, Elijah Mitchell up at the top. Mark Ingram, number 2. Christian Kirk, 3. Juwan Johnson, 4. Jameis Winston, 5. Kenneth Gainwell, 6. Tim Patrick, 7. Sterling Shepard, 8. Nelson Aguilar, 9. And Rob Gronkowski in there at 10. So Elijah Mitchell is the big pickup. No surprise here. Again, I in my home league, it was 49% the fab that was spent on Elijah Mitchell. I didn't get him anywhere in any of my fab leagues. I bid as high as 35 in certain spots. I think 40 in another one. It's a little rich for me, to be honest. Like, I like his outlook in San Fran, but as we talked about a couple times here on the show, is Kyle Shanahan and the history of using multiple running backs. But he also has a history of running backs inside his offense being really, 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 really good. Like Alfred Morris as a rookie in Washington was really good. And I remember being a little hesitant to spend fab bucks on him. And I wish that I spent a little bit more and I had Alfred Morris on my squads in 2016. Tino, what do you think? Did you get any Elijah Mitchell? Are you concerned that this could just be like, maybe this week it's Elijah Mitchell, but Trey Sermon's active and all of a sudden he busts out a couple of nice runs and then he's the guy in San Fran? What are your thoughts?
That's my problem. I don't know what's going on with Trey Sermon. I didn't understand what happened last week. Obviously, it was a surprise to everybody. But now everyone's on the hype train for Elijah Mitchell. To be honest with you, I know he's a rookie and he has a lot of hype, but JaMychal Hasty's kind of getting overlooked. I think you could probably go out and still pick up JaMychal Hasty. For all the people that love Elijah Mitchell, I think you like Hasty for the same reason. I mean, the 49ers backfield and the Ravens backfield are very similar. I think going into this, you knew those are going to be 2 run-heavy offenses, one of the 2 most run-heavy offenses in football, and you're seeing it with the Ravens. It kind of doesn't matter who's back there. They're going to get volume. They're going to get touchdowns. They're going to get looks. Everyone in the 49ers backfield scored. So when Sermon comes into the mix there, I don't know what's going to happen with Elijah Mitchell. I don't know how that's going to go. Is it going to be a 3-back a 3-back led backfield? Is it going to be kind of the duel with Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon? I'm not really sure. So I didn't go all out and spend my fab on Elijah Mitchell. Instead, I told you earlier, I kind of like your guy, Kenneth Gainwell. I think he was more obtainable for me. I did like where he was. I had some random Cordero Patterson shares out there. Again, I had one early on. Obviously, we're in deeper leagues, so this is for deeper leagues, but we're looking for some RB2s with some reception upside. And not for nothing, Cordero Patterson, I think, averaged like 7 yards a carry. Again, granted, Eagles defense and, it's the Falcons. But still, so there are some other guys out there where you can get them for way cheaper, and they're in similar situations as Elijah Mitchell. So although his backfield's kind of better, I think the upside on a lot of those other guys in PPR formats made more sense. But I loved what Kenneth Gainwell was doing for the Eagles, or what he can do for the Eagles in terms of the passing game, and if Miles Sanders goes down in the running game. And so I was able to get him a lot more than Mitchell, mainly because he was cheaper and he was more available.
Yeah, I think the game plan was pretty good for Philadelphia. Now it was the Falcons, and this team is going to be pretty bad. We've talked about it on this show. Their win total was 6.5, and I think we both kind of chuckled about that. And they're just not a really good football team, and they got owned at the line of scrimmage. But I thought with Philadelphia now it's just one game in Nick Sirianni, and that was one of my things, like the 5 things to look for that I think I mentioned on this show, or it's the videos on our FTN YouTube page, was just new coaches and new offensive coordinators just seeing what their tendencies will be and how they're going to run their offenses. And I thought for Jalen Hurts, like he didn't take a lot of shots down the field, but they made a point to run the rock with Hurts and with both running backs and Sanders and Gainwell, and just short, quick throws to, we saw Quez Watkins, Jalen Rager, and we saw with both of these running backs some quick little dump offs. So I think Gainwell is an interesting add and certainly a cheaper one. Mark Ingram is that outlier game. I don't think we need to spend too much time on him. I don't think the Texans are going to be
that
up
Texans
in a lot of football
backfield.
games.
Meaney, there's no way the Texans are getting a game script like that again. He got 25 carries. I think everybody scored. It's just not. I'm sorry, it's not happening again. It's just not. If I got to eat my words, fine. I don't see it. I don't see it.
I don't see it either. Yeah, 4 backs played at least 10 snaps. 3 of them found the end zone. I think this could be a DJ week against the Cleveland Browns, a tougher matchup. They're playing from behind, and maybe a couple dump-offs to DJ. But, yeah, he had a red zone target, which he converted for a touchdown. Philip Lindsay had a red zone rush attempt. He converted. And then Ingram, as much as he had, like, the 25 carries, 26 carries, whatever, like, he still didn't even play 50% of the snaps. And they were running out the clock, and he wasn't all that efficient with those touches. Juwan Johnson on here is pretty interesting. I like him. I think he's a good pickup. I will say this, that he only ran 10 routes. He had 3 targets, and Troutman had a team-high 30% target share. He played 82% of the snaps and ran out 8 more routes. But what I noticed in that game, not a new coach, so different than Philly, but a new quarterback and I think a new system around Jameis Winston. Now, Michael Thomas is not there, and Jair Alexander was all over Marquez Callaway, is that they just tried to make things simple for Jameis. Like, you don't need to be taking shots down the field, Jameis. Like, here's a couple quick little throws. They did a screen pass to Juwan Johnson. The 2 of his 3 targets came inside the end zone, which is super valuable. It's tough to roster. I feel good about rostering a tight end after the first big 6 or 7. You at least want a tight end that's going to be targeted inside the end zone and inside the red zone, and I think that will be the game plan. But Troutman, even though he ran all those routes, I didn't think he did anything fantastic, and maybe that's just one game, and maybe over time we could see Juwan Johnson step up there. Tyrell Williams, actually, wait, I'll save him. He was one of the most dropped. One more guy I wanted to mention here is your guy Sterling Shepard. Man, underrated, dude. Like, this guy, when he's healthy, he's productive.
Meaning people don't like my take that I've said this in the offseason. Giants fans out there wanted Shepard cut because they wanted money saved. And I don't know why, and I banged the table. Most reliable guy on the team, Danny's security blanket year in, year out. And even with Kenny, and I love what Kenny was able to do. I know people are still kind of trashing him. I guess maybe the numbers didn't look glamorous enough, but the Giants offense just isn't glamorous. Shep is a guy, when he's on the field and healthy, scores and is productive for the Giants. He's their true wide receiver 1. It's like, it sounds far-fetched, but it's true. I think Shep is just scoring for the Giants every time he's out there when he's not, dealing with concussions or dealing with his leg injuries. And so, until further notice, while he's out there, he is at the worst a set-and-forget flex play. I mean, Shep's going to get you double-digit fantasy points week in, week out, in my opinion, mainly because if there's one thing you're sure about is that the Giants are going to throw the ball short. And if they are, it's going to Shep more often than not. And Shep is probably the only guy on the team right now that's shown he has anything yards after the catch, like any capability of doing yards after the catch. And you saw that on his touchdown. So even if you're not sure about the Giants offense, he's going to get those underneath routes. He's a sure-handed catcher. And he has that upside of doing things after the catch, and he showed that in week 1. So, again, like I said, I mean, you can put him wherever you want in your rankings, but at the very minimum, I'm telling you, you can wheel him out there in your flex position, and I wouldn't worry very much about it.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I think he's underrated, and clearly he was one of the biggest steals in fantasy football drafts this year. There's been some health. There was a moment, I think, a couple years ago when they were experimenting with him on the outside. I think he's just better suited in the slot. And you're right, Jones does seem to go his way quite a bit. So Elijah Mitchell goes from 0% to 81% in Yahoo leagues. Mark Ingram is just hovering around 57%. Christian Kirk, 46%. So his ownership has jumped up here. Not as much as I thought. 33% jump. But, he's going to have boomer bust games, but he's linked to Kyler, which is super intriguing. Deeper down the list, you mentioned Cordell Patterson. Number 11 that we didn't get to, we just put the top 10 in here was Mike Williams. His 82% ownership is pretty high here now, but he jumped up quite a bit. Zach Pascal, 9%. I don't think you can trust any Colts wide receiver. It was Nyheim Hines who led the team in targets, followed by Jonathan Taylor. It's just one game, but Carson Wentz does look like he doesn't have a lot of confidence throwing the ball down the field, maybe just dumping it off to his running backs. We'll see how that progresses as we move forward. Jarvis Landry, most likely owned everywhere, but he took a bit of a spike in ownership. Cordell Patterson, who you mentioned, who had some nice runs. He's got wide receiver, running back eligibility in deeper formats. He could be something. Jeff Wilson, right? This is interesting. People know, let me get a San Fran back for cheap. I'll just grab Jeff Wilson when waivers run, and I can just pick him up in the morning. His ownership has jumped up to 10%. He was 0% as of yesterday. A couple other notables. Jamal Williams, he had 8 catches. Between him and DeAndre Swift, they had 16 grabs and 20 targets. I think he's going to be a guy that you can play as a flex. Sammy Watkins, I was really intrigued with Sammy's game. Now, he usually has strong starts to the season. Health has been an issue, but 8 targets, 4 grabs, and 96 yards for Sammy Watkins. Welcome back to Mean Streets here on Game Plus and Network. Chris Meaney and producer Tino here with you, taking a look at now the most dropped players. And I think this is more intriguing than the most added players. The most added is, everyone is like, okay, we got these guys and we picked them up, but who did you drop? Who is now hanging around on the waiver wire? And as you see here, up at the top is Mr. Zack Moss. This is, of course, from Yahoo. He was a healthy inactive. Mike Gesicki, Russell Gage, Tevin Coleman, J.D. McKissick, Tyrell Williams, Michael Carter, Sony Michel, Michael Pittman, and Matt Ryan. I kind of get all of it, to be honest. Russell Gage was a player that I had some concerns with, and I think yesterday we talked about him being dropped. Tevin Coleman is another one. I get it. I totally get dropping him. I think in deeper formats, you and I may have had this conversation off air. Just maybe a guy that you can plug in here and there potentially. He did open up as the starter, but man, he basically played the same amount of snaps as Michael Carter. Michael Carter's on this list. What do you make of him, and would you stash him? I think he could be an interesting stash, but it could be just also maybe you don't want anybody in this Jets backfield.
That's what it is. That's the problem. I don't think you realistically want anyone. So I had that realization where it's are you going to realistically trot out one of those Jets running backs with confidence any week? I mean, obviously fantasy is a long season. Things happen. In deeper leagues, dynasty leagues, you definitely have Carter. I mean, if it's a keeper league, that's worth a stash. Maybe you get him for free and that becomes your keeper. If he becomes an RB1, that's worth a thought. But in terms of redraft, depending on your bench size, I just don't know where you fit him in. Like I said before with you, why not take a flyer on a 49ers running back over either of those Jets running backs? Look, the offensive line, Becton's out. And this is something that Jets fans know about, but what really made that offensive line solidified, and I love the Vera Tucker pick, was contingent on Becton being in, so that Vera Tucker can play that guard position. Now I don't really know what they're doing at left tackle, and Becton's an incredible tackle in the running game. Yeah. So without him out, it's a problem. So I told you, in regards to Carter, I don't know as much. In deep leagues, I'm going to just go with the on-paper starter and Coleman, if anything. But really, I probably only have him in a league or two left. I've dropped him pretty much everywhere, mainly because, like I just said, I don't trust it. I did want to bring up here, I'm just going to cut to the drop real quick. Let's talk about Sony Michel real quick. What the heck is going on? I was watching that game, and I saw him out. He got 1 carry. I see the 1 carry. And I was like, wait, has he been on the, did I look away from the screen? Was he in the game before this? He didn't get that carry until the third quarter, I think, right? I mean, I don't know. I think that was probably an under the radar, kind of surprise and takeaway from week 1. It's I was told people had concerns on Darrell Henderson because of this trade, and we thought Michel would have more of an impact. And again, week 1, I'm sure he's going to get some more touches, more than 1, but 1 touch not until the third quarter against a team they were kind of beating up on is a bit of a concern. It's not good. It's not good.
It's not good. I look at it 2 ways. I look at it that way that you're saying, but I also think, and maybe this was a little bit of Matthew Friedman who jumped on here of FTN as well, and he gave the under on Sony Michel carries and rushing yards. He didn't expect him to be involved at all in week 1, and I kind of get it, right? It's a new team. It's a new offense. He didn't get any time in the preseason to run with them, and Darrell Henderson was 100% healthy. Now I do think Henderson. At first, when I was watching that game, I was like, "Oh, Henderson doesn't look that good at all." And then he had a couple really strong runs against a Bears defense that, I think is okay. I think they certainly have some holes in their secondary. I didn't think that they played too great in that game. There were some missed coverages that they had that led to big plays. One Cooper Kupp and one Van Jefferson. But maybe it was just one game. Like if you still have those questions about Darrell Henderson, I think it's fair to continue to have them, even though like he had that strong game. He's a guy who hasn't been able to stay healthy, and the same thing can apply. That the reasons that we like the Michel trade, and I'm not speaking for you, but I'm kind of speaking for myself here, is that they drafted him a couple years ago, and then they went ahead and drafted Cam Akers the following year, and then now like getting Sony Michel is that maybe they don't fully trust him. But it was one game, a good positive game. But I think that, and again, it's all about context. This could be a lot of people in 10-team leagues dropping Michel. I think he's an interesting ad.
Yeah.
I think because this Rams team is going to be really good. They're going to score a lot of points. Just the things that I mentioned about Henderson and the health, if anything were to happen, or maybe McVay doesn't fully like this guy, that he can trust him, and then Michel will quickly or slowly get into the offense. I think out of all these people that were dropped, he's the one to me where I would be like, you know what? I'll probably go and add him and take a flyer on him just in case. I'd like to have a running back that's linked to a top 5 offense. A couple guys in here, Tyrell Williams, Detroit. He left part of the game. I think he missed a full quarter. Early on in the first quarter, he was running more routes than any Detroit wide receiver. I think because, he missed a little bit of time. I think he was getting evaluated for a concussion. We didn't see the targets. But ultimately, what we touched on in the last segment was just these running backs in Detroit and just maybe everything going through them and TJ Hawkinson. And I think the same thing as we said with the Colts. That's why I get Michael Pittman Jr. I really like this guy overall as a wide receiver, but I don't think I can trust any Colts wide receivers with Carson Wentz and Jared Goff on those respective teams, maybe just checking it down to their running backs. Matt Ryan, I have a lot of concerns for. And, the quarterbacks you can just replace with ease. I mean, in most standard leagues, Trevor Lawrence wasn't even drafted in 12-team leagues, and this is a guy who threw the ball 50-plus times. What I will say is that it was Ty Johnson who played 54%, Coleman 26, and Carter 25, but the touches for Johnson 5 to Carter 5. I thought that was telling that just a bad sign, I think, for everybody in the offense, but also I think a bad sign for Ty Johnson that it was week 1, and even though Carter didn't do anything, he still touched the ball just as much as Ty Johnson, but I think it's going to be a complete mess. Tino, if you got that concern board, let's bring that up before we break here. And there's a few players, James Robinson, Ronald Jones, Michael Pittman Jr., Tyler Boyd, and then Mike Gesicki. And I think for me, the biggest concern I have is with James Robinson and the fact that they couldn't control the game against the Texans. And it looked like Carlos Hyde was the lead for Urban Meyer, who's very familiar with, and that James Robinson was going to play the third down role. And he led the team he led the backfield in targets and catches. But Hyde still had a couple of targets, 2 targets and 2 grabs, but he didn't have a lot of usage on the ground, which is super concerning. I'm tremendously concerned. I'm not going to sell. I'm not going to drop him. It's just one game, but Tino, I know you're a Robinson guy too, and it's not the talent. I think he's really good, but Urban Meyer is really going to be a headache this year for us.
I'm glad I have Robinson, and we were on the show drafting plenty of best ball leagues. I'm glad I have him more invested in best ball than I do in redraft leagues. In the one redraft league I'm in, I'm not confident starting him this week at all. I'm really considering benching him. It's more of a standard format, so 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and 1 flex. So if you have that depth, if you have a solid enough, I've told you, if you have like a David Montgomery as your RB3 because you're just, fishing and go RB, then I'm definitely starting a guy like that over him. It's concerning. It is. I'm worried about running backs on teams like the Jags, mainly because they're very game script dependent to begin with. And if he's not getting the volume in the passing game that he was getting last year, then there's even more red flags. I mean, that's the issue. I was banking more on the receptions from him. And if he's not exactly getting that, that's kind of where the biggest red flags come from. But I do want to touch on Ronald Jones because this guy, and we talked about it yesterday. Of course, while we're on the show, Bruce Arians comes out and there's a report that he's out of the doghouse. He's going to start this week. New Year, same Bucs backfield. New Year, same Bucs. Every week, you're not going to really know. You're never going to have that assurance. The thing with Ronald Jones, though, I'd be concerned, but it's never going to be to the point where it's droppable because despite the fumble, and him putting up probably negative a half point for some people and him getting benched, when you do put him out there, he's a running back on a good team and a team with volume that, will probably be playing from ahead. And you still have Lombardi, Lenny, or what is it, Lamborghini Lenny, whatever nickname you want to call him,
Yeah.
that's there. He takes games off. He takes plays off. Like, we've seen this before with him as well. So, Ronald Jones, I'm concerned, but with everything that Bruce Arians said, he's young enough. There's enough upside there. They like him in Tampa from everything I've heard. He's going to get chances, but it's more of a wait and see, because if the fumbles continue, then there's an absolute red flag. Concerns are through the roof. But as long as he keeps the fumbles down, I think he's a viable, like, RB 4-3 kind of guy. Like, you're never going to be fully confident with him, but, like, if you have a last-minute scratch or like a game-time decision and you just trot him out there, he might do better than what people are projecting him to finish this season right now after, game one. So, yeah, tread lightly on Ronald Jones. If the fumbles continue, it's a concern, but he'll be okay. Same year, different, different year, same Bucks. That's what I was.
Yeah, and maybe.
Bucks.
And maybe he gets dropped too. Like, maybe next week we're talking about Ronald Jones being dropped, and that's a back I would take a flyer on too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's things change so much. Like, we talked about Ingram. Yeah, I drafted Ingram late in leagues, but I'm not spending 30% of my fab on Ingram. Like, it's great to pick him up for free and let your league mates spend that fab or draft him late in your draft. But yeah, Ronald Jones, like, if he's hanging around the waiver wire, like, I'll pick him up. Like, maybe he's not a guy that you want to start with confidence, but I think you should just be patient with it all. But it could be just a complete headache in Tampa as well. He isn't really concerned about Gesicki. He's not on his list yet. He says when this is a full O-line in terms of Miami, when it's back together this week, and he still puts up a dud, then he would be concerned. My concern is that Smythe played basically just as much as Gesicki, and Waddle is an addition to the team. Will Fuller is going to make his Miami debut this week, and you still have Parker on the squad. I think that it's just too crowded, and I didn't really like the usage, but you're right, Marco. It is just one game. Scott Timko says, "What the heck, man? Look at my team. I got Mostert, Irv Smith, and J.K. Dobbins, and all the concerned players that you just mentioned: Gesicki, Ronald Jones, James Robinson, and Michael Pittman."
Oh my
just
God!
Thought that was jokes. Rough go for Timko. He does have McLaurin, who also I think he's concerned with as well, considering Fitzpatrick is not going to be the quarterback. MJ says Matt Ryan. I get it. I have some concerns as well. Offensive line, not great. Casey says I'm a bit concerned about Robbie Anderson, the usage with McCaffrey. Back 3 targets isn't a whole bunch, and I just don't trust Darnold with the deep ball. Guy, he says. I like that. Our guy Patty Maz of FTN says Raheem Mostert. Nice one, yes. Dylan Brody says all the players that you mentioned, drop them all. Our guy Big John says he's concerned with the Jags wide receivers. We can mention that, talk about that in a second. Juan Lewis says Trey Sermon he's concerned with. I think we could see Trey Sermon be active this week and maybe an uptick for him. Alex Bernstein says Ridley, Damian Harris, and Tyson Williams. And then Dead President Pick says Brendan Ayuk. Tino, out of all those players, if you can remember any of them that I threw at you there, which one are you concerned with, and one maybe that you're not? Like, nah, Ridley's probably the one that you shouldn't be concerned with overall.
No. Well, I think the Jags, shout out Big John, I think the Jags one is probably the more interesting take there, but I am not concerned about them because opposite of, like, running backs on bad teams, wide receivers on bad teams are kind of, the name of the game in fantasy, especially for later in the season when, you're some seasons or fantasy leagues go into like week 17, 18, whatever we're playing this year. And so sometimes you need to hang on those guys. And I thought they did enough. Marvin Jones did all right. I was surprised in Chark's target share there. I mean, they're going to throw the ball. So I'm not as worried about those guys as Big John is. It's Ayuk. Where people were taking Ayuk to begin with was ridiculous. I got Deebo Samuel basically for free in leagues for what he is. I told you about this. A lot of my setups where I took Tyreek in one of the first 2. If I had a rat pick, I went running back Tyreek. And then Debo's my wide receiver too. And I had incredible weeks. And I don't know why people were kind of overlooking Debo. I know the injury history, but I mean, before Ayuk was getting all those, jet sweeps last year and those plays set up for him, I mean, Debo did it first. Debo was throwing touchdown passes for the 49ers and leading them into the postseason. He had a pass attempt. I bet a pass attempt in that Super Bowl for Debo. It was like over 2.5 pass attempts, I remember, because the guy's dynamic. I mean, Debo Debo can ball, man, and I think people really forgot about him. It's not that I'm so concerned on Ayuk. It's more that I'm really, really high on Debo Samuel right now. Unless he gets hurt, I just think that's going to be a run-heavy team. You have Kittle, and I think when they're passing the ball, Debo is the guy, man. So that's where my concern is. It's just that people drafted Ayuk thinking he's going to be this wide receiver one. On your team, probably a wide receiver two, but on the Niners, a wide receiver one, and he's just not. I think it's Debo Samuel's wide receiver group right now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I was on the fence yesterday, and I thought maybe he was a good buy low candidate, Brandon Ayuk, but you're dead on that the team wants to run the football. Debo's the one. He had a 52% target share in week one. I don't think that's going to continue, but he certainly is the one. And then George Kittle is there as well, but you're right, a team that wants to run the football. And I think all the targets that Brandon Ayuk got towards the end of the season is because all the injuries that San Fran had on their team. He was basically just the only guy there. I'm with you. Big John is a sharp guy, and I know where he's going with that. Maybe the targets won't be very great targets, and we saw that with DJ Chark, second in air yards. He was sixth last year in air yards, and quarterbacks weren't hitting him. He had 12 targets in week one. He only caught 3 passes. Now, one of the passes was a great touchdown. He finishes with 80-plus yards. But I think if you have a Jags wide receiver, you can feel pretty good about playing them because the volume will be there. Marvin Jones had 9, and Laviska Shenault had 9 as well. Jones finds the end zone, and he had 3 red zone targets. He's been a red zone beast. Man, we only got like 30 seconds, but let's bring up this trade board because I really want to talk Giants with you. Most traded CBS Sports, Zeke, Tyson Williams, Damian Harris, TJ Hawkinson, CEH, Dave Montgomery, Josh Jacobs, Amari Cooper, Trey Sermon, and Antonio Brown. Listen, out of all these players, I would be looking to acquire all of them except for Josh Jacobs. I'm concerned about the toe. Say what you want about game script. Kenyon Drake looked okay. He's going to be a factor. I think he's a great flex play, just like Jamal Williams. He caught 5 passes. Trey Sermon, if you can get him for pennies, go ahead. You could probably pick him up for free. I think he's a good stash. Damian Harris, I'm into buying him. He fumbled. He can't fumble again. Bill Belichick will make your life miserable if you have another fumble kid, but I'm into grabbing him. I thought he looked good. For Tyson Williams, I think he's a good buy as well. Now, he missed a blocking assignment. He had a fumble, and he missed some time because he took a helmet shot. But I think, he's going to be a big part of this offense, and he can catch a few balls out of the backfield as well. That's all I'm going to say about these most traded players. I'm into acquiring Zeke, but don't view him as a top 5 running back, but he still is an RB1 on what is a top 5 offense most likely in football.